Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, Jamey Stegmaier, and today we are celebrating our 200th episode of the podcast. Our guest today needs no introduction. He's a founder of Stonemaier Games, who are celebrating their 10-year anniversary as a company this month. Please welcome Jamey Stegmaier. Jamey, welcome back to the binge. How you doing?
Hey James, it's great to be back. I'm honored to be invited for this huge episode. 200 is incredible. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. For people that obviously they can go to Stonemaier Games and see your weekly blog.
Yeah.
On this particular podcast, I think we had you as episode 28 was kind of the intro to Jamey Stegmaier. And then we brought you back with Alex Schmidt, and we were talking about Red Rising, actually. I got it on the shelf here behind me. And that was episode 104. So people want to get into Red Rising, or they want to kind of talk about the intro, check out those episodes. But for today's episode, I'm hoping we can go deep. I mean, 10 years as a company, you've seen it all, I guess, eh? Like, how's it feel to kind of be hitting like the 10-year mark?
It's a little surreal. 10 years is a long time to do anything. It's longer than many friendships that I've had. I've been in multiple houses in that time. I've had multiple jobs in that time. Yeah, so it's a lot has changed in my life and in the world, and in my company. So it's a neat milestone to meet.
When you said 2000, so it's 2012, I guess, was the when you launched. Now, is that kind of like when you started, or when technically Stonemaier became a company, or how did you kind of set the milestone date?
Yeah, it's a little arbitrary. I officially started working on Viticulture, which was our first game, our first Kickstarter. I started working on that around this time in 2011, but really everything hinged upon meeting the funding goal of that Kickstarter, and then ultimately actually delivering it. But the first step was reaching that funding goal, which we reached on September 10th. Of 2012. So that is the kind of the official day that I see. We could have picked other days, like the day that we officially incorporated as a company, the day that we said, okay, let's try this. But that to me is the day that it went from a possibility to a reality.
Now, I don't even know the answer to this, but like Stonemaier as a name, did you have that right from the beginning? Like, was that like upon launch, we're going to be Stonemaier? And how did you, obviously you got the Stegmaier, Stonemaier, but how did you come up with the name? And was it there at the beginning, or did it kind of come in later?
In the beginning, it was just me designing a game. And so I didn't actually have, I guess I could have possibly come up with that name then, but I didn't have a business partner. My friend, Alan Stone, ended up playtesting Viticulture with me and said that he had a lot of fun with it. And he asked if he could continue that process. And he ended up being my co-founder with the company. And so we ended up combining our last names, Stone, his last name Stone, my last name Stegmaier, to essentially create a German-sounding board game company name, because we figured that we were going to make the types of games that we had seen come out of Germany, like Agricola. Was a big inspiration for us. Yeah.
And you were one of the, I would say, if not the first, one of the first to kind of, I guess, in launching on Kickstarter with board games. There's others that were starting to launch games, but you're the first one to kind of get to that I guess indie scale on a consistent basis from from title to title. What was it like kind of back then as an industry versus kind of where it is now? Can you kind of illustrate for us kind of how much has really changed over those 10 years?
Yeah, it's changed quite a lot. And I definitely can't take credit for being the first. I was following on the footsteps of some other great companies, Tasty Minstrel Games, Ryan Lockett from Red Raven Games. He was already on Kickstarter, and a few others. But there were, like, I could probably go back and list on a small piece of paper the number of board game projects that had launched at that point. And nowadays, I could use that same piece of paper for the number of games that launch on any given week. Like, there's so many more games that launch now on Kickstarter, and now we have multiple crowdfunding platforms for games as well. I would say the biggest thing, one big change, other than like the polish of campaigns that you see, the one thing that I can say that I think we're the first at doing that has had a huge impact, hopefully a hugely positive impact on the gaming industry, the community, and the crowdfunding community, is that I think we were the first company to use multiple fulfillment centers around the world. Before that, most everything was shipped from a hub in whatever country or region the creator was from. And we were like, well, there's got to be a more efficient way of like shipping to Australia than shipping from the US. And so that has been a very widespread thing that emerged, I think, at least partially due to our efforts with viticulture.
How many hubs did you start off with? Because now I think you have like quite a few now. I don't know how many. You have dozens,
we have
maybe
four.
Now. Oh, you have
we
four.
Have four now. I think back then we may have even had five. I can't remember.
Really?
Well, we used Amazon multi-channel fulfillment back then. We moved away from doing that after a few projects. Maybe we only had four. But for a little while, we had one in Asia, and it didn't work out the way I hoped. So we haven't had one in Asia for a while, and I can't remember if we had that at the beginning. But I think it was either 4 or 5.
Was the move away from Amazon partly to do with the care they put into packages when they deliver them, or?
That's a big part of it. Yeah. Yeah, we had a collector's edition. I think it was after Viticulture in Tuscany. So I did the Viticulture campaign. Then a few years later, I came back and did a collector's edition of Viticulture and then Tuscany.
Yeah.
And it was this really nice, beautiful collector's edition. And Amazon treated it like any other package, like any other cardboard box. And we had some damages. And also Amazon, pretty it's an amazing story of a company. They do some amazing things for the world.
Yeah.
Also some not so amazing things, but some very good stuff. But they are very impersonal. Like you can't ever reach out to someone at Amazon and say, hey, I put the wrong address on this order. Can you change that? That's impossible to do there. Yeah. Whereas we work with these much more personal, great customer service fulfillment centers now that are able to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it blows me away. Like, and I deal with Funnigan in the States, and I use ShipQuest in the UK. Both of them, I mean, you have a direct line many times either to the person running the company or even in some cases the owner, right?
Right.
And they're responding to you, right? And that personal touch to me makes a huge difference, just in time, quite frankly. The amount of time you burn, and everyone knows the Amazon story where you can't actually talk to anybody, so it's always tickets you're logging, and then just kind of go in this continuous circle of trying to figure things out, which can take sometimes weeks. Versus just getting on the phone with somebody and working through what the issue is huge, right?
Yeah.
Preemptively them looking at the stuff arriving from China when they open up the container and saying, hey, there's half a dozen games here or more that we would classify as ding and dents, right? And they'll set those aside for you, packing them up in the box, making sure that they're wrapping it in like they're getting the game themselves, right? They're wrapping it like. Right. If someone's shipping it to me, how do I want to see it? And I think these things are all, are key. And maybe it might cost a little bit more in some cases. Maybe it doesn't. But certainly I think those extra touches save time and help with quality, right?
And one memorable moment for me related to that is and this is a mistake that I made, but I put the wrong SKU on some metal coins back in I think it was probably 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And so they showed up at Amazon. And Amazon could not do anything with those coins because they already had the SKU in their system under something else. Or I guess they could do something, but they were shipping a product under the wrong SKU and they couldn't fix it. Whereas you go to Funnigan and you say, hey, look, I made a mistake. I put the wrong SKU on this. And they can, like any human being, they can look at it and see that this pack of coins is different than this, this cardboard box that has the same SKU. And they can have that level of service. So,
or even segregate inventory, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Amazon is very good at some things, but not that.
What would you say is kind of like the biggest change you first saw in the industry? So, over 10 years, there's going to be these milestones where it forces you to shift as a company in your style, your approach. But sometimes it's, and the pandemic is a good example of an event, right? That's forced a lot of change in the industry. For you, what was the first kind of thing that forced change for you in this industry?
So an external factor that forced change? Or that's an interesting question. Because we definitely have made some big sweeping internal changes based on things that we've seen. But an external factor, I mean, some of the more recent ones, there are definitely some recent ones, like a renewed focus on eco-friendliness, on social justice, like very important issues like that I think about diversity and inclusion. I think those I've always tried for those to be part of my principles, but to actually be actively acting on them in the board game space was not something that I thought I would be doing when I ran a little Kickstarter for Viticulture 10 years ago. There's some of the big things that I think, they're like global things that the gaming community has taken an active approach towards, which I think is great that we have a community willing to to make hopefully a positive change in a positive, constructive way.
Yeah.
Those are a few that come to mind. Yeah. Was that kind of the thing you were thinking
Yeah,
of?
kind of. And then, so, I mean, representation, I think, is huge, right? And the two things to hit on there.
Yeah.
The one it makes me think of is when you talk about, eco-friendliness, right? And there's a bit of a debate around, do you go all paper in the box so it's recyclable and it's, put in quotation marks, earth-friendly, or do you build a game that's actually going to last, right? And can maybe go through several lifespans and be handed on to someone that goes, at a, these... when people drop their stuff off at the local,
like
used stores or Goodwills and things like this.
Totally.
Then it's going to get another life and another life after that. And is that actually more eco-friendly than just putting it in all paper, which may not make it past the first life cycle? So, how have you guys approached that?
So far, with a mix of different approaches. We're definitely trying to use more paper products than plastic, when possible. Which you're right, that does put a little bit of a limit on the time span of a game. Although I think that's been the case for any game that uses cards or tiles or a box for a long time. Like those components are traditionally cardboard. The edge here. In fact, I was just working on a game today, a game that will come out next year that has some plastic in it, and it's part of it is while I am trying to make Stonemaier Games a more eco-friendly company, I don't want to sacrifice the customer experience, because in the end, the reason we're doing all this is to bring joy to tabletops worldwide. And so some game components, I think, have an impact on the joy that we get at a tabletop. That's why we play or that's at least part of the reason why we play games on the tabletop instead of other platforms. So ultimately, I think the customer experience comes first. And sometimes that will mean that we'll use some plastic that, like you said, will last a long time. There's other negatives to plastic, but it will last a long time. And so if we put a lot of effort into, say, a miniature that we want to look beautiful, that has a very important impact on a game, plastic is the way to make those miniatures right now.
Yeah. So you were saying that internally you had made some changes as a company. So what was the first thing that you guys did to shift as a business, it's from the beginning to kind of where you're at now?
I would say that the first two big milestones in the lifespan of the company, I'll say two because one is really quick. One is me going full-time for the company. That was not the case when we started Viticulture. That wasn't the case when I ran the Euphoria Kickstarter campaign. I made that decision in December of 2013 to go full-time. And I think it was the right choice. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed having this as my career, and I don't think I would have been able to continue to do both. You have a full-time job, you have a second full-time job, and have you gotten to the point where you feel like you have two full-time jobs, or is it more like you have you are at that point? Okay. Yeah.
Yes. It's tough, and I was thinking about this, this morning. I was like, this one thing I really want to kind of understand is you've made that leap, right? Where you've gone kind of full-time. So this is your full-time job. You in some cases, it's integral to your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When you get to that point, which you're in the industry because you love it, and this is a passion where a lot of people want to get to it as a full-time job because they just love the industry. It's their passion. Yeah. But you still have to separate life from gaming, or it's no longer going to be fun, right? It's going to kind of take everything over. How do you balance? How do you separate out kind of the personal life and kind of, or do you try to separate kind of yourself from Stonemaier so you have a piece of time that's to you and your family that's kind of separate from the gaming?
It's been a learning process. Part of it, so for the gaming part, like gaming is still one of my primary hobbies. Yeah. And I'm never really able to turn off the designer part of my brain. I sometimes for games that I know really well and everyone else at the table knows them really well, then I am analyzing those games a lot less than a game that I'm playing for the first time. But that part of my brain is always on, and I found that I don't really mind it. I like when those creative juices are flowing in any form. So that part of it is fine. The big learning point for me is that Stonemaier Games was the core relationship of my life for a long time. And I mean that romantically. I mean that in terms of like kids, essentially. I don't have kids. It was my child. It was my girlfriend, essentially. I was saying, I'm going to give up all this other stuff so I can just focus on my company for a long time. And that changed around 3 years ago when I started dating a wonderful woman who I now live with. And that changed a lot of things too, because I wanted to better balance the time that I spent on the company and still put as much into it as I always had, but maybe with a little less time. So I could also spend quality time with Megan. And so that was a big change in trying to figure that out. And I think we found a good balance for both of us. We're both introverts too. So we both need our own time separately as well after work. So that has worked out really well.
So you have
you found that right back? Yeah.
Have you reached a point yet where like you're somewhere and people are like, can we not talk about games right now? Can we just talk about politics or whatever it is that happens to be going the conversation around the table? Have you run into that yet, or is everybody still pretty much on the game train?
I've essentially surrounded myself with people who love games. Like even like my disc golf buddies that I play disc golf with were all gamers. And so when we get tired about talking about disc golf on the course, we switch over and talk about gaming, or we go back and forth. For better or worse, I don't know. I'm happy to talk about games with anyone at any time. So I like that there are a lot of people in my life who at least like playing games or like talking about games and thinking about them.
Yeah. Another milestone you had, or another shift you had as a company, and we touched on it a little bit on our 2 episodes ago with you, was this movement to almost do your own crowdfunding, right? So moving off the crowdfunding platform to now self-funding, self pre-orders through your website. Can you tell us a little bit about the decision to do that, and what some of the challenges you had when you made that shift?
That was the other thing I was thinking of in this first 5 years. That was the big tipping point. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but it was the decision after we delivered Scythe to backers. We delivered it early. We delivered the product that we had said we were going to deliver, and even I think we exceeded expectations in many cases. And there was kind of this weight of negativity around, or not negativity, it's not the right word, but I got to see an interesting side of human nature that summer when we were delivering something early and backers were still complaining that they didn't get it earlier than other backers got it, even though everything was being delivered within a short time frame to all backers, and everyone was getting it earlier than we had anticipated, which I don't know if you can imagine that now, but now like projects are delivered a year late, and I think people have just gotten used to it. But back then it was very different, and that kind of left a mark on me, and maybe really start to look at other things that had maybe not gone as well, or that were higher risk elements. Like there was one fulfillment center that didn't package things nearly as well as they did the previous time. There are all these little factors that went into it. And the big thing that has stuck with me over time that maybe wasn't as big of a priority then, actually 2 things. One was we wanted to have a better relationship with retailers and distributors. And that, I think, by far has been the number one reason that our company has grown to the point that it has since then.
Yeah.
Like up until that point, we had raised 3.2 million on crowdfunding. Ever since leaving crowdfunding, I think largely due to that relationship with retailers and distributors, and to a certain extent, Wingspan. Wingspan has been a huge hit for us. I think our revenue has been over $100 million in that time. That's a huge increase over the crowdfunding aspect, where people kind of looked at that as the only option. There are definitely other options if you are willing to put in the time to create those relationships with the supply chain. I know that's not for everybody, but that has made a huge impact on us. Yeah.
Is it control? Is that what's helped you kind of get to the next step? Like, is it greater control? Obviously there's financial costs and so forth using the, the crowdfunding platforms, and I mean, which is fair. I mean, you got an audience you're tapping into.
Right.
But this decision to kind of go on your own, was it to take more control, I guess, right? So more control of the supply chain, more control of the quality of how things are going out, and then those relationships, I guess, with the distributors and retailers. Is that fair?
I think control and relationships is a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Originally, we even for our first project, Charterstone, first post crowdfunding project, we didn't even use a pre-order system for it. So at the time, we were saying, okay, we're not going to accept direct orders at all. We'll just go through retailers and distributors and try to have some control that way and hone those relationships that way. But what I found was that some customers wanted to order from us. They wanted to order directly from the publisher. Yeah. And from that stemmed our champion program, which is maybe one of the other big turning points, where we give people not only a way to order from us, but also an incentive to order from us. And that has worked out great as well. It's kind of a paid membership for I think you know what it is, but people.
Yeah, we talked about last time too.
You pay a small amount every year. You get a discount on everything that you order for us for that year, and we prioritize your shipping. And currently we have around 10,000 champions. So I think that's resonated with at least the more diehard Stonemaier followers and fans.
How is the balance between like retail sales and pre-orders. So obviously people who traditionally use crowdfunding campaigns, you're probably looking at like 90% crowdfunding is where the income's coming from, 10%, selling afterwards with the extra stock. I imagine that balance has changed obviously when now you're self-controlled, but is there still a heavy weighting to pre-orders or how's that set up?
It definitely has changed. Now we usually reach out, or we always reach out to distributors even before we start production, and we say, hey, like, how many do you want us to make of this product? And we give distributors privately a lot more information than we used to about the product, so they could say, okay, they have a good feeling about this game, they don't have a good feeling about this game, and we base the initial order on that. And what we've seen in general is that it's about, for the first print run, it's usually around a 50-50 split. So around 50% we sell directly through pre-orders, and then we reserve some more for our web store. And then the other 50% goes into distribution or sold directly to retailers. So definitely a different split, I think, than most crowdfunding projects.
And then as a company, again, I know you guys are lean, right? You guys are really, really lean internally on payroll. Internally. Obviously, you've got a massive network. How do you split the management of like new projects, which, has a certain mindset and a certain focus versus maintaining kind of these past titles that have been produced where you have stock you're selling off or maybe doing reorders and so forth? Is it everybody working on everything, or have you kind of segmented that within your company to try to create almost different buckets of management for those?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. A lot of it is divided between me and my coworker, Alex, who is our director of sales and logistics. Yeah. Alex, a lot of his job is handling quantities, talking to distributors and figuring out that thing that I just talked about for first print runs. Yeah. But a lot of it is figuring out what quantity do distributors want for reprints, and also for localization partners. That's become a big part of our company, working with companies that publish our games in other languages. And so that's kind of Alex's main pocket, getting those estimates, a lot of work with reprints, a lot of work with logistics. And I'm more on the project management side of deciding which new products we're pursuing, and which products are we creating to help renew or maintain interest in brands that we've already created. So like there's, promos, expansions, things like that.
Yeah. How many projects are you guys running now, like in a year? Like I know a lot of companies I talk to are, their capacity is kind of 3 to 4 launches a year is kind of on the high end. I think you're actually might be higher than that. Where are you guys at in terms of your frequency of launches and number of things you're cranking out a year?
We usually aim for and have been hitting around 2 games a year, 2 new games a year, and around 2 expansions, and maybe a fun accessory or 2 thrown in there.
So around the 4 then, yeah. That seems to be the limit when I talk to a lot of people. It's a lot, right? Like,
yeah.
Especially if you're doing 2 new games, those other 2, like I can't imagine doing 4 new games. That would almost like, that'd be a lot to handle, right?
I think so. And I kind of like, I like keeping it like I could hire another person and probably increase that capacity.
Sure.
But, or I could work more and increase that capacity. But I kind of like that we have a false, I don't know if stopgap is the right term, but I don't really want to create more than that. I would rather really shine the spotlight on a few great products every year than kind of inundate our fans or the gaming industry in general, given there's so many other awesome products from other companies coming out too. So I want to make sure that we're publishing the best of the things that come through our door.
Well, that's awesome. I noticed you've got, as part of your 10-year anniversary, this game called Smitten. Can you talk a little bit about that? And did I read somewhere that it's like free or something this month, or you get it free with another game? Or can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, Smitten is a little 1 to 2 player cooperative game that originally the very brief version of it is that I was inspired by these comic book cards that I collected as a kid, where there was a certain set of cards where you could combine 9 cards into a panorama if you collected the right cards. And so the original thought was we wanted to do something interesting for our 10th anniversary. And so I was going to create the 9 different cards and then just randomly put one in every package that we sell in September without telling people anything about it.
That'd be cool.
But I kind of realized this as I processed that idea a little bit more, that people would probably be confused by it. There might be cards that don't end up in the package, they end up damaged, or there's no context for it. Someone might open a package and wonder, like, why did I get it? Is this a mistake? What is this? And so eventually I was like, okay, why don't I just make a little game out of this and we'll give away that for free instead. And so Smitten emerged from that concept as something to give away to celebrate the people who have supported us over the years and hopefully into the future. So it's a game that will sell in the future, but you're right, through October 1st, with any Stonemaier Games web store order, we're including it for free.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, when you're talking about kind of that, tapping into your childhood, right? And like it's, anytime I think that, you're able to pull in the nostalgia, it just, I know it makes me smile when I think of anything that I do. If I can tap back into something I did when I was a kid, it almost makes you a kid again, right? So I'm sure that during that process, it brought back a lot of memories, I'm sure, and happy memories kind of flooded back with that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you feel like in any ways that you're accomplishing that with your podcast? Was there
with the podcast? I would say the podcast I just learn a lot, right? So I talk to a lot of publishers. I'm learning quite a bit. For me, because my design partner in our publishing business with Tin Robot Games is my brother, my younger brother. For us, it's a lot of bonding time. Right. Nice. And when we're playing games, we think back to things that we thought were cool when we were younger. Right. And we say, okay, how can we incorporate this? And the hours melt away. Like when you are in the zone, and you're talking about this a little bit earlier, when you kind of get in that, that deep zone of creative zone, it's like time doesn't exist, right? Like it really does. You just kind of hone right in, and we get into that state quite a bit, playing games together and so forth. So for me, having nostalgia from when I was younger and then being able to pull it forward and still kind of build those new memories, it's certainly an awesome feeling.
That's really cool.
So what's next for you guys? You obviously you've got to. Can you talk about the next game at all, or is it a secret, or can you let us know, or what's coming?
Fortunately, the next thing, fortunately, is not a secret. It's the new Wingspan expansion, Wingspan Asia. So we've started doing kind of spoiler cards here and there, and the full reveal of the rulebook will be on October 5th. So coming up in about 2 weeks now, we'll do the rulebook reveal followed by the pre-order. So this is a game that we've already produced, and it will go hand in hand with a giant box called the nesting box that we've made to store all Wingspan content, past, present, and future.
So it's like a mega box, is it then, or?
It's a mega organizer box. So it doesn't come with all Wingspan stuff. It comes with Wingspan Asia inside of it.
Okay.
And people can put the other Wingspan stuff they already know inside that box. So I'm excited. That's been something I've been talking about for a while.
Yep.
And Wingspan Asia is much more recent, but I'm excited to finally get that stuff out in the world, share it with people. And there are some big surprises about Wingspan Asia that I can't reveal yet, but I'm very excited for 2 weeks to come, and I can finally reveal.
Oh, so you'll reveal in 2 weeks, yeah?
In 2 weeks, October 5th. Yeah.
Oh, that's super awesome. Are you still doing the play testing night? Like, are you still deeply involved in the community in that regards too? Like, I got to say for people listening, like you are probably one of the most selfless that I've come across in this industry in terms of your website, sharing your knowledge. We often talk about it on the podcast. Just the sheer number of times you're actually touching other people's stuff shocks me, right? Like I'll see you talking about another game that it's not a Stonemaier game, it's someone else's game, but you still talk about it. Yeah. Is that been kind of almost like a tenet for you as a company to say, I'm just going to be as transparent as possible, even mistakes, right? Like you're very transparent on what doesn't work so that people can learn from that. Are you still, or is the goal to still kind of, continue with that and share both with the development nights and other gamers as well as kind of sharing some of this knowledge on your website?
Absolutely. Yeah. That became a core tenet pretty early on through the blog. And then later on came through my YouTube channel where I talk about game design. I love games. I love talking about games. I love content creators. I love designers, publishers. Yeah. I mean, there's so much amazing creativity in this industry that goes beyond me. That very early on, it felt weird just to talk about myself and my own stuff. And so it felt more right to me, at least, to be, I guess, generous with my love of all these things. And so, absolutely. That will continue. I think probably long after, even if Stonemaier Games is no longer a company someday, fizzle out, I think I will still be talking about games that I love and designers and content creators that I admire.
Well, certainly, I think you've been a role model for others, because I'm starting to see a lot of this now in the industry with people just giving, right? giving to give for the point of giving with no expectation of necessarily anything coming back, but just to try to see how they can lift others up. Because I think if we lift each other up, the whole industry as a whole rises, doesn't it?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it. I've seen a lot from other content creators too. Like I'm blanking on the name right now. There's a company that came out with a game called Bark Avenue, and I'm blanking on their content right now, but they were just a YouTube channel for a long time. And they still are, and I had no idea that they were even working on a game because their focus seemed to be more on just being amazing reviewers.
Yeah.
And they revealed at some point that they were making Terradice Games. That's the YouTube channel, Mackenzie and Jonathan. I just thought it was awesome that they started through the goodwill efforts and just sharing their love of games and reviewing games, and then they also put a game out there. So yeah, I think that's awesome that people are doing that.
Oh, super cool. Jamey, I want to thank you so much for helping me celebrate this 200th episode. Congratulations again on your 10-year anniversary. Maybe we'll get you back for episode 300.
Well, yeah, I hope. Yeah, congratulations, 200 on 200. Yeah, I know. I don't need to say I hope. I know that you'll make it to 300.
If we get there, we'll see. I might be kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but yeah. All right,
if it continues to excite you and have fun, and you have fun with it, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, James, for the time today. It's always great to talk.
No worries. Take care. Cheers.
See you.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.